What do you think of as the one big failure, what you'd accept as a failure of Indian foreign policy? Our relations with countries in our immediate neighborhood somehow don't seem as optimal as they should be for a country of India's size, stature and aspiration. Do you concede that?
No.
That China seems to be meddling, and while we are trying to weigh in and have an Indian area of influence, there's a very strong Himalayan shadow that hangs over each of these relations.
So, look, if you ask me, are there serious problems with China? My answer to you would be yes. But I would use the word challenge rather than failure. I am presented today by China with a different posture, which clearly must have some calculation or thinking behind it. There is an effort in the last 3 years to actually, reflect that posture on the line of actual control, and I have actually stood up to it. So I would actually say I've risen to the challenge. That today, in a military sense, the fact that we have been able to deploy so many troops for round the year in very hard conditions, probably one of the hardest in the world, with a posture which deters Chinese response. In fact, in many ways itself is an achievement, and it's an achievement because among the efforts of the last decade has been the change in the border infrastructure. There was an era where the thinking was, let's not do anything on the Chinese border, and that's the best way, they won't come in and we don't have to go there. Now, that proved to be completely wrong, that they kept developing their side of the infrastructure and would keep putting pressure on the line of actual control.
So I read with great fascination your chapter on China, and you've got references to Ravana, you've got references to his arrogance, his overconfidence, etc., and his supposed vulnerabilities and weaknesses. What are the vulnerabilities and weaknesses that you see? And also, where do you see the India-China relationship go from where we are at right now?
Well, as they say, all references in my book are coincidences and are for the reader to draw their own reference. I am making no one-to-one correlation.
You just intersperse them at the right places. China, and then there's Ravan.
Any connection you make are in your mind. Okay. I think one of the most complicated issues in global politics today will be how the only 2 billion plus societies, which both happen to be among the oldest civilizations of the world, today are rising. How one part of it is how they manage their relationship with the rest of the world and the new equations which come. But the other is how do they create an equilibrium, because both are rising at a phenomenal pace. And I grant you, the Chinese, for a variety of reasons which I've hinted at in my book, because I think we didn't make the right policy choices in the 70s, 80s, but today, when you can see a very visible momentum in India, tremendous growth, and growth with the kind of infrastructure change, the human resources are transforming. I mean, a much more inclusive, much more all-rounded growth. I think today, how do we create that equilibrium? To me, that is going to be one of the big issues for Indian foreign policy, surely for Chinese foreign policy, but I think for world...
That's the question. What's the answer? How do you create that equilibrium? Because despite everything that Prime Minister Modi tried at the beginning, the Chinese have a very different reading of the situation.
Look, in life, everything doesn't go your way. You make a best effort. Other people have their calculations, could be right, could be wrong. And sometimes you are presented with a situation as we were presented. Now, what happened? In 2020, when the Chinese made the move on the LAC, the fact was we were in the middle of a COVID lockdown. I think people in this country still don't fully appreciate for us to move tens of thousands of troops with that rapidity to those mountains in that cold with the COVID lockdown was actually a phenomenal logistics operation. And then to stay there and to support that. So the fact is yes, we have a challenge. I don't think anybody is in denial of that challenge. Your question, how do we deal with the challenge? I think by a variety of ways. One part of it would be to really build up our own deep strengths, as I call it. I think we must manufacture, we must develop technologies, we must build infrastructure, and these were neglected even in the era of reform. These were neglected. I mean, you still have people who say that we are not a manufacturing power. That's like abdicating, you're giving up on the race before you even entered it. We tend to say, there's a degree of cult worship in our country, and everything which was done in 50s and 60s, Nehru did it, so that's Indian foreign policy. There could not have been any other choice. I think as a provocative piece, I want people to think. It's a debate, I'm not saying everything Nehru did was wrong. But I'm saying even at the time when many of these choices were made, there were alternatives that were proposed. And one of the important debates was on China. It was on China starting with day one, 1950, when actually Patel has a different sense of China. And he cautions Nehru. So it's not like you say, well, we all thought that there'd never be a problem, and then there was this great betrayal. There were very sensible, sober people in this country who said, look at the nature of what we are seeing across the Himalayas. Recognize what it is. And one of the issues I have from that period is we consciously, shall I say, gave up on a set of relationships and options which would have helped us address the problem. And today, as far as I'm concerned, to me, if national security is at stake, there is nothing that I will not do. So, whereas earlier on, for a variety of ideological reasons, we ourselves said, we won't exercise this option, we won't take that country's help, we will not turn to this country. So, what are we doing? Your ideology today is getting in the way of what should be your response. Whereas today we are much more hard-headed about what we should do. The interesting thing, even in 1962, I mean, imagine Sela and Bomdila have fallen, and Nehru actually writes to Kennedy saying, I could have asked you for more help, but I don't know what really people would have said about it. So you're still hesitating with the PLA advancing into India. Now, that is, I think, a subject of legitimate debate today, not because we have to be critical about the past, because there are lessons to be learned from here, and those lessons, by the way, came back to haunt us in the Quad. That when Quad happened, first time, Quad happened, there was pressure on us, we backed off. This time around when Quad happened, we made sure we will not back off. So there are lessons